Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you read a menu at a restaurant without squinting? When did you stop sitting in the back row at movies? Not because you wanted to sit closer to the exit, but because the screen was just blurry. When did you quietly start increasing the font size on your phone and hoping nobody noticed? If any of that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And more importantly, you've probably been told the same thing millions of people over 50 get told every single year. It's just age. Your eyes are getting older. Here's a stronger prescription. And every couple of years, the prescription gets stronger, and your world gets a little smaller. And at some point, you just accept it, the way you accept gray hair or a slower metabolism, as something that simply happens. But here's what I want you to sit with for the next few minutes. What if that story isn't completely true? What if the decline you've been experiencing isn't just inevitable aging, but partly the result of things happening inside your body that nobody told you about? Things that are changeable. Things that respond to what you eat, how you sleep, how much strain you unknowingly put on your eyes every single waking hour. I'm not here to sell you a miracle cure. I'm not going to tell you to throw away your glasses tomorrow. What I am going to do is walk you through what the research actually says about why eyesight deteriorates, especially after 50, and the specific, practical things you can start doing right now that support your eyes at a biological level. Some of these are almost embarrassingly simple, and some of them, I guarantee, your eye doctor has never mentioned. So let's start at the beginning. Why does vision change as we age? The lens inside your eye, the one that bends and focuses light, used to be incredibly flexible. When you were young, it could shift its shape in milliseconds, snapping between near and far focus like a high-performance camera lens. But over time, the proteins that make up that lens begin to stiffen. They harden. The muscle around the lens, a tiny ring of muscle called the ciliary muscle, has to work harder and harder to create focus. And eventually, it just can't stretch the lens the way it once could. That's called presbyopia. It's the reason almost everyone needs reading glasses by their mid-40s. And it's real. That part of the story is accurate. But here's what the story leaves out. The speed of that process, how fast your lens stiffens, how quickly your focusing ability drops, isn't fixed. It's influenced by oxidative stress inside the eye, by chronic inflammation, by blood sugar levels that spike and crash throughout the day, by how hydrated your eye tissue is, by whether certain nutrients are present in sufficient quantities to protect the delicate structures inside your eye. In other words, genetics loads the gun, but your daily habits, what you eat, how you rest your eyes, what you expose them to, pull the trigger. Or don't. And the same logic applies to the other major conditions that start showing up after 50. Macular degeneration, cataracts, dry eye syndrome, and glaucoma. All of them have a genetic component. All of them also have a massive environmental and nutritional component that most people are never educated about. Let's talk about the single most underrated threat to your eyesight that is happening to almost every person reading this right now. Oxidative stress. Your eyes are one of the most metabolically active tissues in your entire body. They consume enormous amounts of oxygen and energy every second of every day. And that metabolic activity produces free radicals, unstable molecules that damage cells, proteins, and DNA when they're not neutralized quickly enough. Normally, your body produces antioxidants to clean up the mess. But after 50, that cleanup system becomes less efficient. Free radicals start outpacing your body's ability to neutralize them. And your eyes, being so metabolically active, take the hit early. The macula, the small central region of your retina responsible for sharp, detailed vision, is particularly vulnerable. It contains two pigments, lutein and zeaxanthin, that act as internal sunglasses, filtering harmful blue light and neutralizing free radicals. When those pigment levels drop, the macula becomes exposed. Cells start dying, and that's the beginning of age-related macular degeneration, the leading cause of serious vision loss in people over 50 in the developed world. Here's the thing that almost nobody talks about. Lutein and zeaxanthin are not made by the body. Not even a little bit. You have to get them from food. And the average Western diet delivers a fraction of what your macula needs to stay protected. So what does your macula actually need? The research here is genuinely exciting. A landmark study called the AREDS-2 trial, one of the largest and most rigorous nutrition and eye health studies ever conducted, found that specific combinations of nutrients significantly reduced the progression of macular degeneration in people at risk. We're talking about a 25% reduction in the risk of advanced AMD. That's not a small number. That's 1 in 4 cases potentially slowed or stopped with nutrition. The nutrients that mattered most? Lutein, zeaxanthin, vitamin C, vitamin E, zinc, and omega-3 fatty acids. Let's talk about where to actually get these. Lutein and zeaxanthin are found most abundantly in dark leafy greens, kale, spinach, collard greens, and in egg yolks. The yolk is actually one of the most bioavailable sources on the planet, meaning your body absorbs it better from eggs than from almost any other food. A single egg yolk contains somewhere between 200 and 300 micrograms of these pigments, in a form your intestines can easily absorb. Studies have shown that people who eat 1 egg per day for 5 weeks measurably increase their macular pigment density. The science on this is solid. Bell peppers, particularly orange and yellow ones, are another underrated source. So are corn and kiwi fruit, which consistently shows up in research as surprisingly effective at raising zeaxanthin levels. Omega-3 fatty acids, specifically DHA, make up a significant portion of your retinal tissue. Your photoreceptors, the cells that detect light, are packed with DHA. When dietary DHA is low, those membranes become less fluid, less responsive, and more vulnerable to damage. Fatty fish like salmon, sardines, and mackerel are your best sources. 3 servings a week is the target most research points to. Zinc is critical for the enzyme activity inside your retina. It helps vitamin A produce a protective pigment called melanin in the eye, and plays a role in transporting vitamin A from the liver to the retina. Low zinc is consistently associated with poor night vision and increased macular degeneration risk. Oysters are by far the richest source, but pumpkin seeds, beef, and lentils are solid everyday options. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention: blood sugar and your eyes. Most people know that uncontrolled diabetes damages eyesight. Diabetic retinopathy is one of the leading causes of blindness in adults. But what most people don't realize is that you don't need to be diabetic for chronically elevated blood sugar to quietly damage the delicate blood vessels inside your eyes. The retina is fed by a network of tiny capillaries, some of the smallest blood vessels in your body. When blood sugar spikes repeatedly throughout the day, those vessels take damage. The walls thicken, blood flow becomes sluggish, and the retinal cells that depend on that blood flow start getting starved of oxygen and nutrients. Over time, this shows up as blurring, distortion, and sensitivity to light. It also accelerates cataract formation. The lens of your eye is bathed in a fluid called aqueous humor, And when blood sugar is high, glucose accumulates in that fluid, gets converted into a compound called sorbitol, and damages the lens proteins. Cataracts, at their core, are largely the result of this kind of chemical damage to lens proteins over decades. This means that stabilizing your blood sugar isn't just good for your heart and your waistline, it's directly protective of your vision. Less sugar, more fiber, more protein at each meal to slow glucose absorption. Fewer ultra-processed foods that spike insulin within minutes of eating them. These aren't vague wellness suggestions. They are mechanistically connected to what's happening inside your eye. Here's something I want you to try right now, or at least today. Go outside and look at something at least 20 feet away for 20 seconds. That's it. It sounds almost insultingly simple, but there's real science behind it. It's called the 20-20-20 rule, and it addresses a problem that is accelerating vision problems in adults and children alike: near-point stress. When you focus on something close, a phone, a laptop, a book, the ciliary muscle inside your eye contracts and holds. It squeezes that lens into a curved shape so you can see clearly up close. The problem is that most of us spend 8, 9, 10 hours a day in that contracted state without releasing it. That sustained tension causes a condition called accommodative spasm, where the muscle essentially gets stuck, making it harder to focus on distant objects and accelerating the strain-related deterioration of near vision. Every 20 minutes of close work, looking 20 feet away for 20 seconds, allows that muscle to fully release. It's the equivalent of unclenching your fist after holding it tight for 20 minutes. The relief is immediate, and the cumulative effect over months and years is significant, particularly for anyone already dealing with myopia progression. There's also growing research on outdoor light specifically. Natural daylight, even on an overcast day, is far brighter than indoor lighting, and exposure to that light appears to stimulate the release of dopamine in the retina, which plays a protective role in eye development and helps regulate eye growth. Children who spend more time outdoors have dramatically lower rates of myopia. And while the evidence in adults is less dramatic, the principle holds. Your eyes were designed to spend time in natural light, not just looking at backlit screens in dim rooms. Let's talk about something people rarely connect to their eyesight: sleep. While you sleep, your eyes are doing something remarkable. They're being cleaned. The glymphatic system, a kind of waste clearance network in your brain, ramps up activity during sleep and flushes out metabolic byproducts that accumulate during the day. Your eyes have their own version of this process. Cerebrospinal fluid circulation around the optic nerve increases during sleep, clearing inflammatory debris that could otherwise damage optic nerve fibers over time. Poor sleep is also directly associated with elevated intraocular pressure, the pressure inside your eye. Elevated intraocular pressure is the primary driver of glaucoma, a condition that silently destroys peripheral vision before most people even notice. Studies have found that people who sleep fewer than 6 hours a night have measurably higher intraocular pressure than those who sleep 7 to 8 hours. That's not a tiny correlation. That's a direct, measurable biological link between your sleep habits and your risk of one of the most common causes of irreversible vision loss. If you're over 50 and you're already struggling with sleep, this isn't meant to add anxiety to the pile. It's meant to reframe how seriously you take sleep hygiene. Blue light blocking glasses after 8 p.m. A dark, cool room. No screens in the hour before bed. Consistent sleep and wake times. These aren't wellness fads. They're protecting the pressure in your eyes every single night. Now, I want to address something that comes up constantly when people start researching eye health on their own: vision training. There's a lot of noise in this space. a lot of products and programs that make claims that outrun the evidence. So let me be straightforward about what the research does and doesn't support. For presbyopia, the age-related loss of near focus, there is no exercise that will meaningfully restore the flexibility of a stiffened lens. That structural change is real, and no amount of focusing exercises will reverse it. Your reading glasses aren't optional. However, and this is important, the research does support the idea that certain aspects of visual function can be trained and maintained. Visual processing speed, contrast sensitivity, and the brain's ability to interpret visual signals can all be improved with practice. This isn't about the eye itself. It's about the neural pathways connecting your eye to your visual cortex. Those pathways are plastic. They respond to use. This is particularly relevant for people who've noticed that their vision seems worse in low light, or that they struggle to distinguish contrast as well as they used to. These aren't just lens problems. They're also perceptual problems that can be partially addressed with exercises like contrast sensitivity training, which is now used extensively in the rehabilitation of patients with various visual impairments. The simplest version of this? Read in very lighting conditions. Look at detailed patterns. Practice focusing on objects at different distances deliberately, rather than letting your eyes passively rest on screens all day. Your visual system, like any system, is maintained by use. There's one more thing I want to talk about, and it connects everything we've covered: chronic inflammation. If you've watched anything about modern health in the past 5 years, you've probably heard about inflammation. It gets talked about so much, it almost stops meaning anything. But in the context of your eyes, it is absolutely central to understanding why vision deteriorates. Almost every major eye condition, macular degeneration, glaucoma, cataracts, diabetic retinopathy, dry eye syndrome, has chronic low-grade inflammation as either a cause, a driver, or an accelerant. The inflammatory molecules that circulate through your bloodstream when your diet is poor, your sleep is short, your stress is high, and your gut microbiome is disrupted, those molecules reach your eyes. They damage blood vessel walls. They trigger immune responses that harm photoreceptors. They degrade the tear film that keeps your corneal surface healthy. This is why the dietary advice isn't incidental. Anti-inflammatory eating, omega-3 rich fish, colorful vegetables, fermented foods, minimal processed sugar, isn't just good for your heart or your brain. It's changing the inflammatory environment that your eyes live in every single day. People often ask me whether supplements can replace food for this purpose. And my honest answer is, some supplementation is genuinely useful, particularly for lutein, zeaxanthin, and omega-3s if you're not eating enough of the right foods. But supplements don't deliver the full matrix of synergistic compounds that whole foods do. A handful of spinach doesn't just give you lutein. It gives you vitamin K, folate, magnesium, and dozens of polyphenols that work together in ways we're still mapping. A capsule gives you one thing. Start with the food. Add targeted supplementation where your diet genuinely falls short. Let me pull everything together because I know this has covered a lot of ground. Your eyesight after 50 is not simply a story of inevitable decline. It is a story of cumulative damage, from oxidative stress, from blood sugar fluctuations, from inflammation, from chronic near-point strain, from nutrient deficiencies that build up silently over years. And cumulative damage can be slowed. In some aspects, it can be partially reversed. The people who maintain sharp, functional vision well into their 60s, 70s, and beyond aren't doing anything heroic. They're eating eggs and leafy greens. They're eating fatty fish regularly. They're stepping outside for a walk in natural daylight. They're putting their phone down every 20 minutes and letting their eyes reset. They're sleeping 7 to 8 hours. They're keeping their blood sugar stable with whole foods and protein. They're managing inflammation by cutting out the ultra-processed foods that drive it. None of this requires a prescription. None of it requires expensive equipment. And unlike a stronger pair of glasses, which simply compensates for deterioration without addressing its cause, these changes work at the level of the biology itself. Your eyes are not a passive system that ages on a fixed schedule. They are living tissue that responds to signals you send them every day. You can send better signals starting today. If this gave you something new to think about, or something to actually try, share it with someone you know over 50 who's been quietly accepting that their eyesight is just going to keep fading. Because it doesn't have to be that way, and they deserve to know that.